My job was not necessarily to just pitch my client and say, hey, Jack at New York Times, I have this client and this is why they're great, etc. My job was to be a resource for the journalist or the reporter and help them to meet those deadlines and those needs and those story sources and help them turn things around. Sometimes they only got 2 hours. And I want to be the one that they can call.
Welcome back to another episode of the PR Style Guide with co-host Danielle Williams and Robin Newton, talking to women making strides in the PR, marketing, and communications industries and doing it with style. Now let's get into it. Welcome back to another episode of the PR Style Guide. I'm your co-host Robin, joined with my co-host Danielle Williams for another episode. We are excited because this is now the second half of season 2, and we are continuing with some amazing and fabulous guests. And before we jump into introducing today's guest, I want to first ask you, are you following PR Style Guide on Instagram? We have an Instagram, we have Facebook, we are active on YouTube. You can find all of our podcasts there, including some of our shorts. So if you are not following us on social media platforms that you are locked in on, make sure you do that and share with your friends. And now I'm going to turn it over to Danielle to introduce our guest.
All right. Thank you, Robin. And again, welcome everyone to our season 2. We're really excited about the guests that we are getting to bring you this season. And so today's guest is no short of, again, someone who we're excited to sit down with. So I have the pleasure of introducing our guest for today, and I'm just going to jump right in. So in 2008, Amore Philip transformed a pink slip and unemployment into an opportunity to start her entrepreneurial journey. Before launching Apples and Oranges Public Relations, Amore attended LIM College, where she studied fashion merchandising while gaining experience in the fashion, entertainment, design, and build industries. Under her leadership, the agency grew from a one-woman operation to a boutique firm with over 13 employees in 2016. Amore has secured media placements and coverage in top-tier outlets, including Forbes, CBS Mornings, Business Insider, ELLE, New York Magazine, Inc., and Fast Company. Notable projects include the U.S. launch of the Statues for Equality, PostNet franchise, Fashion Innovation, Positive Luxury, Fashion Week Brooklyn, New York Taxi and Limousine Commission Accessible Dispatch campaign, and TEDx Water Street. Amore is an alum of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program and has received several accolades, including the 2020 Stevie Award for Women in Business, the 2019 Hermes Creative Award, and a spot on the AM New York 2023 Power Players Rising list. Here are 2 things you may not know about Amore, which I thought was phenomenal. In 1994, Amore survived a car accident in which her vehicle flipped over a bridge, yet she emerged without a scratch. Wow. In 2008, while unemployed, Amore launched her PR agency from the ground up using her unemployment checks. These experiences have taught Amore that the most impactful stories are born from authentic lived experiences. And with that, PR Style Guide community, let's welcome Amore Philip to our podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Amore. I just have to say, before we jump into the details of your background, you are a true PR lady because she is giving you the tips. She is branding herself out the gate with her bio.
Right, absolutely. So, yes, we're so excited. So, the way we love to kick things off here is with our first question. So, when did you first fall in love with PR?
I fell in love with PR around 2008 or so, having done some courses while I was studying fashion merchandising. But I really fell in love with PR after I was working in the design and build industry, and I was an account manager. And so the individual who managed the PR for that specific company, she had to go on leave for some reason. And she decided not to come back. And so one day my boss came to me and he put some of her folders, at the time it was folders, on my desk. And he was like, Janina's not coming back. And so there's these two things to do. You need to make these calls and reach out to these people. And until we find someone else to replace her. Well, that replacement never came and it happened to be me. And so I just dove right into it. I would have to do presentations for the architects that came in to spec the different types of materials they were going to use on the buildings that they were working on. And I was always told that my presentation was really good. And from there, I was like, okay, I kind of like this. And so it just kind of fueled me to want to present for other people. So when you're working with, as you two ladies know, when you're working with clients and you're representing them, in a way you are presenting them. And then for me, I always like to put my best foot forward, and I figured I could be successful at it and I could add value to businesses and founders that were trying to grow. So that's where my love for PR came in. Accidents, I guess you get that there's a lot of accidents happening.
It's amazing. So, and you said before the person went out, what was your role there at the company?
My role was account manager. So my job was to go to different firms that needed architectural supplies and present them, buy them lunch, and present them with the best products that we had at that time. And so that was my job. So it was to sell some of the architectural supplies.
Got it.
So you went to LIM.
I did.
Okay. And what did you major in? Tell us about that experience.
Fashion merchandising. So when I was growing up, I grew up upstate New York, close to Canada. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with, but I moved to New York City in the late maybe 1994, 95 to study fashion merchandising. And at the time, I ended up,
Yelled to read that.
yeah, and I ended up studying theater as well because I also wanted to do that. But I always wanted to be like an anchor woman when I was growing up. I used to watch Oprah and I was like, oh, one day I want to just be telling stories and doing things like that. So that was one thing. But as I was studying fashion merchandising, I really learned a lot. I learned a lot about placement and positioning of products in order to appeal to a consumer. That's one thing I really learned. And so I really like that. I always was thinking about if I have this product, who am I talking to and what is the best way to speak to them? What is the best way to present to them? And where does my message needs to be so that they could see it, hear it, and want to do business or buy that product, etc. And so I learned some of those things from fashion merchandising. And also I learned a lot about cotton, like where cotton comes from, and a lot of cool things. And so I kind of married my fashion experience in theater, and I did some really cool things like working with in New York Fashion Week, some internships there. I worked in most of the retail high-end stores like the Bergdorfs and the Saks Fifth Avenues and the Bloomingdale's, and then also did some work in theater both on and off stage. So I've always been this sort of always presenting in a way. So those were just things that I love that I married together.
Danielle and I both love fashion, and we talk quite a bit about fashion on our podcast because it's a love of both of ours, but we also recognize how the way that you present yourself is something that, excuse me, transcends over to into PR. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I love like you already mentioned how you kind of married how all those things go together. And even with you being an account executive, that's sales. You were selling the clients, on the products, but PR is also sales. It's communicating, but it's selling the clients or selling who you're presenting for as well. So I used to be in sales when I was like in college, but I still see how that even helps today with what I do in PR. So that's pretty awesome. Cool. So now I know that one of our, how did you get started in the PR business? And so after you left LIM, what
Mhm.
was your path to what kind of jobs, or I know you said you had internships. Just tell us a little bit more about your path and getting to then starting your own PR company, which I know you said you did that from unemployment.
Mhm.
Those I'm very curious to hear about all of that. So you could tell us a
Sure.
little bit more.
My journey in terms of how I got to PR is I worked a lot in retail. So as I mentioned, working in Bloomingdale, Saks Fifth Avenue, and things like that. So I worked in retail for a while, and then I ended up working in a lady suit manufacturer on Seventh Avenue in Manhattan. And I did that for several years. And these church ladies would come in with the hats and all this stuff, and I would be the one to help them. And from there, I started, and I was also doing theater, and so at the time. So I was studying theater. I also worked in restaurants as well, waitressing. And then I did extra roles. I did like different things. I had an agent at once. And so I was doing both at the same time. I just like to be busy, right? And so I got to work on a lot of great projects. And as I did that in about 2006, I would say, about my daughter 2006, my daughter was born in 2004, so 2 years after my daughter was born, I decided to make a little bit of a different decision. So I said, okay, I can't be skipping around at restaurants and doing this and doing that. So I needed to really just do something that was more permanent, and have the regular 9 to 5 and be home at 6, pick her up from the babysitter, and do all those things. But another thing that led me to starting my own agency, so before I got to the design and build firm where I was working at, they downsized, right? And this was in about 2008. And so I went in the unemployment line like a lot of people did. And that job never came. So I was getting the unemployment checks, and I was just like, all right, so what do I do? But I was looking for stuff. So on the side, I was just a little hustling also. And then so I said, okay, I'm going to take my checks. I'm going to do my website. So I got somebody to do the website. I'm going to get some flyers, business cards, whatever it was. I used those checks to do that because I just really said, this has got to work. But one of the things that really kept me in the game for 15 years, I always remember why I started. And the reason I started is because one of the things that was important to me is that my daughter was she was young at the time. And so I wanted to be at home with my daughter. And so I said, I want to be home and I want to earn a living. How am I going to do that? And so it was important for me to not be picking her up at 7 o'clock at night. Then she goes to sleep, and then I'm back at it at 6 in the morning, getting on the train, getting on the highway, whatever it was. And so I wanted to create some sort of a freedom, not only for myself, but also to be an example for her, to show her that she has choice, right? When she's growing up, she can either create her own company or work for a great company. But either way, you have choice. You don't have to do anything. And so that's what kept me going, even after times where I was going to give up, etc. But I went basically fashion, merchandising, and entertainment, then to design and build. And then they downsized, and then I was unemployed. Before I launched the agency, I had friends in both the entertainment and fashion world. And so I called them up and asked them if they needed help planning events and doing other things. And so I would help them put together events, independent film screenings, charity benefits. I would get them sponsors, I would get press there. And I was like, this could work out. And so people started asking me to help them out with different things. And so 2 years after that, so I built up a client base, and then that's when I incorporated and launched a company in 2010. So that's how I ended up, and that's how I got there.
That's impressive, very
Very
impressive. Yeah. And you gave yourself up as a resource to them before you asked them to even be clients of your company. So it gave them an opportunity to see you working and to see what you were capable of doing before giving the big ask of, will you come on as a PR client of
Right.
mine? Yeah.
Yeah.
So having done both, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer working for yourself, or do you prefer working for a company? Both have their pros and cons.
There are days where I say, I just want to go work for a company because it'll be so much easier. But there is, as I mentioned, the word freedom. There's freedom and a lot of growth for me in working for myself because in starting an agency, let's say, because I don't necessarily have anything to lean back on or fall on. Of course, I can go back and get a job, but I made it an all of or nothing situation. And so throughout the process, throughout the years, I have made so many mistakes. We would probably need 10 hours to talk about it. And I have learned so many great things from those mistakes and made some great friends and built some really great relationships along the way. So if I had to choose, I would say starting my own agency, no matter what has happened, I would never change a thing. And I just, take the good with the bad. But I do say that there are great things, working at a big agency, like going to WPP or an Ogilvy and having all these benefits and being in the shiny W World Trade Center and things like that. So I like that too, but I've grown a lot from starting my own agency. And what I've learned and the growth that I've achieved is just priceless.
Absolutely. And a few things you mentioned were just very impressive to me. But one was that you used your unemployment checks to launch a website, and you had a small daughter, you were unemployed, and I mean, you live in New York, which, it's expensive there.
Expensive.
Yeah, so that just shows your level of discipline, your level of focus. And so that's very impressive in itself. I don't know if there's anything more you want to share on that. And I guess my other question was, when you started your website, was the name Apples and Oranges, was that the name back then, or you started a totally different website back then?
That was the name. And how I came up with that was I was originally interested in helping founders of food and beverage brands build, grow, and, get awareness and opportunities. And so I called it apples and oranges because I also like the color red and orange for the branding. And then also when people speak in business, they sometimes say it's like apples to oranges. And so it was kind of like catchy. I was like, it's kind of corny, but then it's a little catchy. And I just went with it. And then there are people who a lot of people don't forget the name. That's one thing. And there are a lot of people who are like, oh, that's a great name. And so that's kind of how I came up with it. That was really what was behind it. And I started as Apples and Oranges Public Relations. I've rebranded 3 times since, meaning the logo. So it's went from one thing to what it is now. And in terms of 2025, I'm actually rebranding the agency. So it's no longer going to be Apples and Oranges Public Relations. It's going to be something else. It's still going to be PR, but the focus is going to be more on luxury experiences and fintech startup companies. Yeah. But I'm still going to have my regular, I'm still going to have the people who were with me from the beginning. And, and I'm still open to working with different types of industries, but that's going to be my focus. And I kind of made that decision during the pandemic, actually.
Okay, my question was going to be, what brought about that focus? Was it just seeing the trends, or could you name some specific areas?
Yeah, so trends had to do with it. But what I found during the pandemic was that there were some industries that were not as affected by the pandemic, but not only, well, everyone was affected. Let me just rephrase that. What I'm saying is that they grew as a result of meeting the needs and the changes from the pandemic. So, for example, I had a couple of friends who own tech companies, and they went from maybe $500,000 a year to $5 or $10 million a year during the couple of pandemic years because they had to, a lot of companies went virtual, right? And so a lot of things there was even a bigger need for leveraging technology then. When we were in the office, I'm seeing everybody. We didn't need to be on Zoom. Excuse me. We didn't need to be on Zoom, and we didn't need to have these virtual hubs and all this stuff. And so there was not this need for that. And so I saw the growth with my friends with the technology companies, and then food and beverage. Although some restaurants closed, they had to develop the delivery sort of systems, right? They had to come up. They had to do pickups and whatever. And then what I liked about that was you could just get your alcohol in a little cup and you could go. In New York, we did that. Like you could get, the little plastic cup, and you could take
That-
your wine to go. And I was like, that's kind of cool. I like that. But I saw some industries that really grew out of that, and some that really tanked. And so, for example, with PR, I had several events planned for that coming year. And so a lot of those things were shut down, they were pulled. And so I just said, maybe I want to focus on industries that are a little bit more resilient and can
Mhm.
stand through any types of economical, changes that, may not be so affected. So that was part of my reason. And I'm also a big lover of technology and how technology can make your life a lot better, and experiences. And I just like to be a part of anything that's an experience.
Can you speak a little to the rebranding? I know obviously you don't want to share the name at this juncture, but I'd love to know what made you come up with the idea to rebrand beyond obviously the direction that the company is going in. Obviously, you've already been working with tech companies, and I was just wondering if there was any one particular thing.
So, in terms of the rebrand, it's something that I was thinking about for a while, but with the pandemic and the other things that came up, I said I wanted to go ahead and make the change. And then also, I was just ready for something different. And not that it's
Mhm.
going to be much different because it's still going to be PR, but it's just going to be a little bit more niched and focused. So, there's also a whole new other positioning, different types of color schemes. So it's going to appeal more to the luxury market, let's say.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's kind of what I can say. I worked with a branding company for about a year before I came up with the new logo that I'm going to use. And it took me a while. And so I went through different companies, and I found one, and they presented this design to me. And I was like, that's it. It was like that, I knew it when I saw it, right? I know what I wanted only when I saw it, but I couldn't tell them what I wanted.
Yeah.
But they got
Right.
enough information from me, and they were good at what they did in order to understand where I was trying to go with the company and the positioning that I was kind of going after. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of how it's going right now. And I do say that there is a time, because now it's going to be 15 years this year, right? So I feel like it's also a natural thing for me to be in that thought, to want to make that change, because a lot of companies do it. They change the name a little bit, they change the logo, they change focus. And I think it's all about, it's part of the evolution and the growth.
Yeah, well, congratulations on 15 years.
Yeah.
That is an amazing milestone. And as it said in your bio, you went from a one woman operation to over 10 employees or, individuals that work with you. And so that's amazing. I do want to shift a bit because you also have had some pretty phenomenal placements in places such as Forbes, Elle magazine, and or Elle, just different places. The community is growing and seasoned PR professionals, even some newbies. So, do you have any tips on the best ways to grow yourself as a PR professional, whether as a newbie or as a seasoned professional, and even just sharing about maybe how you got some of those placements or just any tips that you have around that?
Sure. So for those who are new in the game, just have patience and really want this. Make sure that it's something that you really want to do. Because there's, as we all know, a lot of people think that they don't see the work that we really do, right? And they, it looks on the outside, it looks like you're just hanging out at cocktail parties and red carpets. That's there. And I love that. I like that. But a lot of what we do, there's a lot of grind and hustle behind it that the clients don't see. And I say to people that are new, if this is really what you want to do, be ready for it. Be there for it. Learn as much as you can. Find a mentor, find someone to help you with guidance that you can bounce, can tell them, I'm thinking about doing this. Is it a good idea? And find a couple of ladies that are doing great things in PR and maybe follow them on Instagram and LinkedIn and just learn as enough and get enough knowledge as you can from them. And also for the seasoned ones that have been in the game, don't be afraid of technology. Don't be afraid of the changes. Because when I started, we were still doing fax, writing the press release. There are times where I was still doing that. A lot of things were more manual. You had to show up at places. And now you could just do a lot of things online. People are using AI to do a lot of things. So don't look at it, because I see some PR people who say that it's taking their jobs. A lot of my writer friends, they're like, AI is replacing them. Just innovate with what's happening. Like, get with the program, find a way to keep up, find a way to constantly evolve with the changes that's happening in the industry. And so I was very resistant to that. I was resistant to AI. I was resistant to a lot of technology. I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And my friend was like, okay, don't do that. And about 6 months ago, I finally got with the program. And let me tell you, there are some tools that I'm using now, especially with social media schedulers and, just things that are helping you with your ideas and just helping you be a little bit more efficient. And in terms of some of the placements that I got, I believe you asked that question. For me, I started to learn that my job was not necessarily to just pitch my client and say, hey, Jack at New York Times, I have this client and this is why they're great, etc. My job was to be a resource for the journalist or the reporter and help them to meet those deadlines and those needs and those story sources and help them turn things around. Sometimes they only got 2 hours, and I want to be the one that they can call, right? And so also with some of the placements that I got, I would do my research, and I never really just pitch. I used to do that, but I never really just pitch a journalist. I would look and see what they wrote about. What does she need? Like, what is she talking about? And then I would take my client and try to bake her into the journalist cake, right? So that's something that I think we should do more of, because a lot of us, sometimes we're pitching the journalist and they're getting like 1,000 pitches per day, right? And so they have a lot to go through, and they have deadlines, and they get stuff cut and all this other stuff. So my approach is to be a resource for the writers, for the journalists, the producers, etc. And that's how I show up.
I love that.
So you mentioned having a mentor. Do you have a professional mentor?
I won't say she's official, but I did this course at Columbia for small businesses. And I will say that if it wasn't for that course, I don't think I would have made it past COVID. I think I might have closed. But that course, it was myself and 20 other small businesses. And we were selected. We had to do an interview process and everything to get in. And so we formed a bond, and we were very supportive of each other. And she was like the mompreneur. Let's go. She was like a mom to us. She really nurtured us. Her name is Willie Mae Vesey, and her program is the Columbia Community Business Program. But that was like before COVID, so I don't know if she still does it now. But her company is called Covenant. Oh, I forget the last part of it. But anyway, she was really there for us. She was really a champion and a resource for us. And so we all still meet and have dinner like quarterly and talk about our growth. So I would call her a mentor, in the sense that I learned a lot from her course. And also, the community that we built, it really helped me to stay in the game during the COVID years. And then there's a lot of other PR people that I follow too. And, like a lot of PR people that I follow and admire, and a lot of agencies that I follow them, and I look at what they're doing. So, there's a lot of people that I also do learn from.
Yeah, I think something you mentioned when you were giving tips was to not be afraid of technology and, to be online. And one of the things that we talk about here is the importance of a personal brand. And I would love to know your thoughts on that. Sounds like you're pretty active, online. You mentioned following people, but how important do you feel that it is to have a personal brand, to show up professionally online? How important would you say that is in today's landscape?
I think it's extremely important. And if you're not doing that, you're not going to win. You may go so far, and then it also depends on the product and service. Maybe you sell, I don't know, you sell eyelashes or something. So maybe you don't need to be out there. But then again, I follow a lot of girls who do the eyelashes on Instagram. And so I find some of them, when I'm in need of that service. So, but I would say for the most part, especially for people in professional services, it is important that you build a personal brand. And I want to say that I don't think that it's like something that you just get right. I think it's always a work in progress. You're getting better, you're learning more information. A lot of the information that I have now, I didn't have 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so if I had that information then, I probably would be, a $20 million company or something like that. Now that I have that information, it's part of the reason why I've changed focus is I see myself adding value to companies at a specific, maybe in the high stake sort of space. So I do think that personal branding is very, very important. And it could be something small. Just start with showing up on LinkedIn and sharing your expertise and communicating and engaging with other people on LinkedIn and just being consistent because consistency is also part of your brand, right? So if you are posting every day, that is saying you're consistent. That's part of your brand. And I would say also when it comes to branding, just be consistent in terms of how you show up, where you show up, your presentation, the rooms that you're in, all those things matter. And so I always say, always think of things as a work in progress and just learn as you go, correct as you need to correct, get rid of what you don't need, and get rid of what no longer serves you.
So you've worked in the fashion industry, you were a fashion merchandising major. And as I
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, we love fashion.
We
So
do.
what's one fashion staple for you as a woman in this industry?
A nice pair of heels is one staple. Yeah, I would say, and just like a really nice A-line dress, like an Audrey Hepburn type of thing that you could go anywhere in. Like you can put some flats on and go to the grocery store and look really nice, or you could just put some heels on with it and show up at the most fancy dinner in town, and you just fit right in. So that's one of my staples: a nice A-line black dress or pencil skirt, and some really great heels to go with it.
I'm a heels girl, so that
Me
makes my
too.
heart sing. Um, I will say that prior to having two kids, I have two small kids, 5 and 3, soon to be 4. They're 18 months apart. Oh, and the pandemic happened. So while I still love heels, they used to be my tennis shoes back in the day. That's how much I would wear them. But now I'm, learning to love the sneakers, look, which is actually integrating more into the professional brand today as well. But yeah, Robin's probably smiling because she knows that that makes my heart sing because I do love a great pair of heels anytime.
Yeah. And I think, it's whatever makes you feel good. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable in your own skin. And you're not worried about how you look in it or is it too tight or what have you. But I think it's what makes you feel your best. That's what I would say.
I couldn't agree more.
Same, I couldn't agree more. So, how do you consume news? Being a PR professional, you got to stay up on news and current events. So, what's your go to resource for doing so?
My go-to resource is I like to go to LinkedIn. I do like to just go to the normal Business Insider and Forbes and things like that. I do like to listen to podcasts. I like to listen to what is it called? Not is it Spotify? Yeah, I think it's Spotify. There's a lot of great podcasts on there, and so I listen to podcasts. I do listen to a lot of personal development type of podcasts, and news, very minimal. I look for the things that I need to know and I filter out all the other stuff. So YouTube is another place that I would go. I don't watch TV, and so I would go on YouTube and see kind of what's happening on YouTube or just on social media, etc. But when I really want like real news, I'm just going to go read the standard publications where you get, that type of news from. So one of my favorite places to get news from would usually be, I like to look at Entrepreneur and just Bloomberg for basically anything economic and business. And then usually Al Jazeera, things happening around the world. So that's usually kind of where I get my news from. And then I also keep in updated with any type of industry news. So I will be on PR Week, of course, and any place where there is news about PR, the PR industry.
I love that. That was a great variety that kind of touched all over. So thank you for sharing those. Along those same lines, what are some PR or comms or marketing books or resources that you would recommend to whether it's industry newbies or seasoned individuals? As you said, it's our job to stay up on news, to build community. So, what are some resources or books that that you would recommend?
I like this book called The Brand Story. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a really great book. And I also do read books on Ogilvy as well. Also, I like um, I like reading different types of books that has to do with how people like consume their news. There's one called Propaganda that I've read. So those are some of the books that I have read. But I do read a lot of Awaken the Giant Within. I do read a lot of books that have to do with personal growth because I think if you're not growing mentally, physically, spiritually, you can't do anything else. So I tend to focus on that. But one of my favorite books is not even a PR specific book, but it's called The Brand Story. And I think that, for anyone in PR, that makes sense. And it also helps with personal branding. And it also really breaks things down really, really simple. So I like that book. And in terms of other resources, there is what is that? They're on Instagram. It's PR. It escapes me. But anyway,
Is it?
there are some great groups also on Facebook. One is called Respect the Publicist.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys are familiar with that, there's czars,
Yes.
and there's several. There's Quoted, I believe, has a group. So there's a lot of groups on Facebook that I join, and that's kind of where I connect with a lot of the PR community. But the other PR resources, I know you guys know it. It just escaped me for a minute, but they're on Instagram. And there's also PR, the public relations, the Black Publicists Society of America. I like that resource. But the other one, a lot of people use it. I can't believe I forgot it. But they're on Instagram, and a lot of people use them as a source, like all things PR. I also like PR Daily. I think especially people that are starting, that are new, PR Daily is a really, really great resource. And that's something that I read just about daily is PR Daily actually. I set aside like 30 minutes and I read it. And may I add, if you're in the PR business, I really think that it's important for you to learn the history of PR, especially a couple of people are credited as the godfather of PR, which is Edward Bernays. I'm sure you guys are familiar, but I did have a couple of interns once and they didn't know who he was. And I was saying, you just got a master's in communications. And I found it like odd that they didn't know who that person was. So it's like kind of going into basketball and you don't know who Michael Jordan is, that kind of thing. But I read a lot of his about a lot of his campaigns and how he went about changing behaviors in society. And one of the major campaigns was the Torches campaign with the cigarettes and getting the women to smoke. Torches of Freedom, it was called. That
Mm-hmm.
was one that changed behavior in society. And I do think successful PR do that, do just that. They make changes to behaviors and society. And that takes a while. That is no small task.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. We like to usually close things out with what we call the lightning round. Danielle, anything else that you want to ask or learn about before we jump into that?
I did have two questions, but I'll just ask one, which we normally ask. So, just what is the best advice that you have ever received personally? And then, what is the best advice that you would give to our audience as PR, comms, and marketing professionals in today's industry?
One of the best pieces of advice that I've been given is if you're going to start something or you're going to do something, always have a reason, a big why for doing so. And as you're going about doing that thing throughout your journey and things get tough, you want to give up, things get hard, always remember your big why of why as to why you started. And is that worth you staying in the game, right? One of the things that I just keeps me going is my big why was so that my daughter could have choice. That was my big why. And whenever I feel like giving up, I'm like, if I'm giving up on if I'm going to give up, I'm giving up on that. And I wasn't willing to do that. That's I would say some of the best advice that I've been given. And also, I would say consistency. Like I realize that it's not what you do, like, like, it's not something big that you do. For example, we would do a whole lot of stuff. We'll be really busy one week and we'll see all these good results. And then the following week we won't do as much or won't do anything, right? So that creates problems with consistency. And so I've learned that consistency wins the game. So it's just being consistent. Even if you do one small thing per day, could just do that every day and you will eventually get there. As long as you're on the road, you'll get there. You might not get there when you want to get there, but you will end up where you're going if you stay on that path.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Well, what a great way to end this episode before we get into our lightning round. So, are you ready, Robin?
Absolutely. This has been awesome, Amore. Thank you so much for all the gems that you dropped. How can people stay connected with you? What are
Yeah.
your social handles?
And your business.
Sure. So you can find me, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you can find me under Amore Philip on LinkedIn. You can also find me at The Iconic Amore on Instagram, and same on Twitter, The Iconic Amore. And then for the business, it's Apples and Oranges PR. And it's the same on LinkedIn as well as on Twitter and then on the web as well. So you can find me there. And I prefer LinkedIn as a place to communicate and connect.
One more quick question, because you've mentioned LinkedIn a few times. Do you get a lot of leads on LinkedIn? Client leads?
I have started to get a lot of leads. Let's say I've started to expand my network on LinkedIn. And that's led to some consultations, some discovery calls. It's led to a couple of partnerships. And also it has increased. My following has increased because I started over the last month posting consistently every day on LinkedIn. So every day I shared something. I shared my expertise. I shared an experience. I shared something. And so as a result of that, I think I went from maybe 7,500 followers to almost 10,000 now within the last couple of months, just by being consistent on LinkedIn every day. And so I used to look at the impressions or the amount of people that will like it. And it'll be like two people and this and that. And I would just post one day and then don't post for 2 weeks. That's what I was doing before. But then I decided that it was about consistency. Just show up because you don't know when the person that needs you is going to be there. But you just need to always show up. And I said, I'm just going to apply this to LinkedIn. Every day I'm going to post, even if there's one person that like it, even if nobody likes it, if no one sees it, I see it, right? And so I'm constantly showing up. And so I've seen, on LinkedIn. So I can say yes to that.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Very cool. Okay, so we're going to jump into this lightning round.
Yes. All right.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Mac or PC?
PC, reluctantly, PC.
Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Fall or spring?
Spring, new beginnings. Love it.
Beach or mountain?
Beach,
Black suit or blue suit?
black.
Instagram or Facebook?
Instagram.
Samantha Jones or Olivia Pope?
Samantha Jones.
Washington Post or New York Times? I think I know the answer to this.
New York Times.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this one too. But heels, sneakers, or flat?
Heels.
Extrovert or introvert?
Extrovert.
Amore, thank you so much for
You're
joining
very
us. This
welcome.
has been fun. We've
Yes.
enjoyed chatting with you, and thanks for sharing your many, many years of experience and expertise. You are a real trailblazer in this industry, and we appreciate you joining us.
Thank you so much. And I would also like to add that if there's any people that are anyone that's starting in the industry and you're looking for some guidance or you may be looking for an internship or something like that, I sometimes have internships available throughout the year. And so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn because I'm always looking to help, help the up and coming publicists and just give someone an opportunity.
That's amazing. Well, we will be sure to link your LinkedIn in the episode notes, and we look forward to everyone connecting with you and us staying connected with you as well. So thank you, Amore.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of the PR Style Guide, and we'll see you all next time.